In the modern world, both monotony and systematic repetition are two words synonymous with everyday life, and it is those facets that go on to make existence both repetitive and predictable. This can drive otherwise usual individuals to eccentricism, and in some cases, for lack of a better term, craziness. In Sunglasses by Black Country New Road, vocally performed by Isaac Wood, this truth is demonstrated through the lens of an average youth, daydreaming of growing old and being swallowed by monotony. To combat this, he reflects on the useless information he was fed throughout his youth and falls into an intense, cynical, closed-minded eccentricism that he carries through the remainder of the song. Through the journey displayed in the speaker's spoken word passages full of powerful repetition, juxtaposition, allusions, and intense imagery and detail, the lack of variation in the youth journey to adulthood is brutally displayed and is used to set a warning as to its ill effects. As I see it, the song follows a linear structure that can be segmented into three distinct movements of the speaker's descent into madness, the first of which begins humbly with the speaker before his realizations about the world around him. Alright, so I really think the vocal deliveries throughout the song are phenomenal and really help for understanding the full situation as to what is trying to be portrayed, but since I obviously can't just play the entire song, I'll be reading some of the actual verses and playing the actual recording of them whenever I see fit. I am going to start off by reading about a third of the first movement. Welcome to the best new 6-part Danish crime drama. She steams herself in marble rooms, courtesy of Pig. I lose myself in the light of the TV, courtesy of her father. She buys everything that glows gold in the kitchen larder. The first stanza here begins to set the tone for the rest of the work to follow. Here the speaker is essentially beginning to reflect on the systematic cycle that is his life, first by recognizing the materialistic needs of the people around him. He laments over the personified pig, who commonly, metaphorically, represents capitalism and materialism. In the same sense, he then begins to lament how his presumable lover is trapped within those desires as well, presumably due to her father, who has grown into, and for better or for worse, embraced the aforementioned system, fitting exactly as society intended him to. In general terms here, he is essentially pointing out all of which society labels as the desirable outcome of life, that being an existence full of slaving for work to afford niche, lavish things that no one truly needs. For the next excerpt, I will play the actual delivery of it, as in my opinion, it is really one of the things musically that make the song great.
Mother is juicing watermelons on the breakfast island, and with frail hands she grips the Nutribullet, and the bite of its blades reminds me of a future that I am in no way part of, and in a wall of photographs in the downstairs second living room's TV area, I become her father and complain of mediocre theater in the daytime and ice and single malt whiskey at night, of rising skirt hems, lowering IQs, and things just aren't built like they used to be. The absolute pinnacle of British engineering.
Here the speaker continues to hollowly analyze the world around him, first by the metaphysical comparison of a blender's blades to a lost future. This could suggest a few things, perhaps relating to the destructive nature of the blender. The speaker perhaps suggests that there is a higher power that is taking otherwise beautiful fruits of nature and placing them within a structure that is designed to completely pulverize and to make different parts of one whole uniform and homogenized. As he continues, the line, "I become her father," signifies a hypothetical future in which he leaves his youthful, promising body to place himself within the shoes of a father past his prime and potential. And while he is in that state, he then begins to complain about the stereotypical, monotonous facets of living and whatnot, relating to the stereotypical later human life of work, television, and drinking that many adults fall into. Whereas once he was a promising youth with aspirations, in this newfound reality, he is left to be nothing more than a nondescript, unimportant working-class man whose existence is nothing more than complaining about minor inconveniences and the way things used to be, both in modesty and other physical and social senses.
And I guess in some way.
So next is the shortest segment of the speaker's episode. The only line that's repeated in this segment is the line, "I am so ignorant now with all that I have learned." That line is repeated as both the vocal delivery gets more raw and cynical, and while the instrumentals fall from a beautiful climax into noisy chaos. Here the main contrast of the poem comes in as the speaker continues to reflect back on his life up to the point of approaching adulthood and independence. He believes that he is ignorant to the outside world despite all of the school and education that he has been put through, and he feels like he is destined to fail and be unimportant due to the lack of preparation that he received, as well as the ignorance he claims he has because of it. This leads way to his later cynical epiphany, where he begins to turn into an eccentric due to the belief that his ignorance is crippling. So rather than living and falling into the cycle that he explored and recognized prior, he instead chooses to hide behind a false persona of which he believes stands out amongst the average crowd of people, essentially avoiding the nightmare that he dreamt of earlier. In the third and final movement of the song, the speaker has fully embraced his own eccentricism. I will once again play the actual vocal delivery of a small excerpt of this last section.
I am invincible in these sunglasses. I am the Fonz, I am the Jack of Hearts. I am looking at you and you cannot tell I am more than the sum of my parts. I am looking at you with my best eyes and I wish you could tell. I wish all my kids would stop dressing up like Richard Hell. I am locked away in a high-tech wraparound translucent blue tinted fortress and you cannot touch me. I am invincible in these sunglasses. And cars are going beep, beep, beep. And there are so many roadmen on this street. And they cannot tell that I'm scared. I am invincible.
By this point in the song, the speaker is fully transformed into the persona that was mentioned prior. He locks himself behind the titular sunglasses that he later repeats at the beginning of the following stanzas, believing that he is a stereotypical heartthrob that women are destined to desire, shown with the allusions to the Fonz and the Jack of Hearts. He also begins to show his closed-mindedness with the line, "I wish all my kids would stop dressing up as Richard Hell," who was one of the many lead voices in the developing New York punk rock scene in the mid-70s. At the same time, he addresses the audience generally, and a hint of insecurity is shown, as he mentions that those who can see him cannot tell how small he truly is behind the facade of the confident, cool persona he invented for himself. As the end of the song approaches, before the very final stanzas, two bridging stanzas are used as the instrumentals crescendo into another climax, this time loud and aggressive, which aids in the defensive nature of the lines that they surround. The stanzas go as follows. I'm more than adequate. Leave Kanye out of this. Leave your sertraline in the cabinet and burn what's left of all the cards you've kept. I am more than adequate. Leave my daddy's job out of this. Leave your sertraline in the cabinet and burn what's left of all the cards that you've kept. Once again, those two stanzas then repeat one more time before the final stanza of the song happens. So by this point, the speaker is entirely crazy, and here, before he reaches the conspiracy theory-driven paranoid phase in the very last lines, he begins to reassure himself of his new opinions and denounces and defends himself against those who criticize him. He says to leave his father's job out of this, presumably because, from the surface, it appears that he is just another privileged youth complaining and making up nonsense to gain acknowledgement and attention. Finally, he then attacks his opposition by alluding to antidepressant medication and demanding that they stop taking it, and also demanding that they burn what's left of all the cards they've kept, which is an attempt to persuade those who conform to society to metaphorically burn all of their past beliefs, as to adopt his fake radical ideologies that he created due to his own existentialism. Insanity is a state of mind driven, in many cases, by indistinguishable actions repeating at length with the expectation of eventually achieving a different result or outcome. Insanity is also driven by one's own view of the world around them, as paranoia and irrationality also go hand in hand with that said altered state of being. Within the speaker, these concepts are shown in great detail, as the dramatized journey that is had brings the listener through a voyage of lament, ironic reflection, and desperate retaliation. The warning set by the speaker's downward spiral into insanity is undeniable, and informs the listener perhaps to be aware of the systematic repetitions that make up life, yet calls them to handle it differently than the speaker due to the outrageous acts he portrays. The story utilizes the imagery of a psychotic, insecure man to show the extremes of what the system it denounces causes, as to inspire others to not follow in either path it talks about, those being the monotonous, repetitive path in addition to its extremely radical counterpart. Ultimately, life will be cyclical in some senses at one point or another, but it is really the reaction to that cyclical nature that is truly important, as that said reaction can go on to separate and distinguish the monotonous and the insane from the untroubled and satisfied, of an otherwise discouraging, often heartless world.